World War Z, An Oral History of the Zombie War by Max Brooks. Part 1, The Beginning, the Spark Before the Fire. It began not with a roar, but with a whisper. A rumor here, a strange death there. And though the world would soon tremble at the footfall of the undead, the opening scenes of the zombie war were subdued, choked by secrecy, disbelief, and the arrogance of modern man. The official reports began in the mountains of China, a small village cut off from the world. A boy, Patient Zero, was bitten while diving into the depths of a submerged ruin. His body changed, not with fever or illness, but with a silent death. He died, then lived again. And from that spark, the inferno would rage. The Chinese government, in an effort to contain the disease and avoid international embarrassment, suppressed information. Entire villages were burned, quarantines enforced with brutality, and witnesses silenced. It was a cover-up born of fear. But a contagion doesn't obey borders. It slips through fingers, drips into oceans, and finds passage in every traveler, refugee, or smuggler. Dr. Quang Jingshu, a respected physician, was among the first to raise alarm. He examined the boy, puzzled by his unresponsive nature and cloudy eyes. When the child bit his own mother, and his wounds failed to bleed, Jingshu knew this was no ordinary illness. His pleas for help were buried under bureaucracy. He was detained. His knowledge erased. As the infection spread beyond China's borders, the black market organ trade became a grotesque highway. A heart from an infected donor in China ended up in a transplant patient in South Africa. There, it began again. One city after another, the reanimated dead began to walk. In Israel, a whisper reached Paul Rediker. The former apartheid strategist had long warned of catastrophic scenarios. His controversial survivalist doctrine was dusted off, studied again. In what many would later call the Rediker Plan, he offered salvation at a terrible price, abandon some to save the rest. Meanwhile, America remained unaware or perhaps willfully ignorant. The government dismissed the crisis as African rabies. The media framed the undead not as a species-ending threat, but as regional crises, misunderstood phenomena. After all, this was the 21st century. The age of medicine, drones, and satellites. Zombies. That was fiction. Pharmaceutical companies like Breckenridge Pharma exploited the panic. They released a placebo vaccine, Phalanx, marketed as a cure. People lined up by the millions to buy it. It calmed the populace, numbed the masses. But it did nothing. The dead kept walking. And then came the Great Panic. Part 2, The Great Panic, when the world fell apart. The moment of reckoning came quickly, faster than anyone could have predicted, yet much too late to stop. The world had squandered its chance to act, and now, the reckoning surged forward like a tidal wave of death. The Great Panic was not merely the collapse of governments or the fall of cities. It was the shattering of human confidence. Humanity, for all its triumphs, had not believed in monsters. But monsters had come, slow, mindless, rotting, and the human mind broke faster than the human body. In America, chaos reigned. The military, unprepared and still tethered to conventional warfare doctrine, fell hard. The Battle of Yonkers was meant to be a showcase of firepower, a grand display of American dominance. Instead, it became a bloodbath. The dead were not frightened by noise or overwhelmed by fire. They didn't retreat or break ranks. They just kept coming, steady, relentless, immune to fear and exhaustion. The soldiers had no tactics for this. Ammunition was wasted. Lives were thrown away. And the undead marched on. Media broadcasts of the defeat at Yonkers sent shockwaves across the globe. Confidence in leadership evaporated. People looted, fled, turned on one another. Families crumbled, institutions collapsed. Humanity became its own enemy as much as the dead. Russia locked down its borders and initiated mass purges, executing anyone infected, anyone suspicious. Rumors spread of underground tunnels filled with burning bodies and prayers. In India, the conflict with Pakistan escalated into nuclear confrontation, triggered by desperate refugee movements and cross-border infection. South Africa implemented the Rediker Plan. Entire cities were marked as unsalvageable. The military withdrew to create fortified safe zones, leaving millions to be devoured in the buffer zones. These sacrificial zones bought time, but at the price of countless lives. Rediker himself disappeared, broken by the horror of his own plan. In Japan, the technological haven shattered. An otaku named Kondo Tatsumi, once bound to a wheelchair and virtual reality, emerged reborn. He adapted, using stealth and discipline to escape the undead-filled cities. In contrast, blind former gardener Sensei Tomonaga Ujiro chose to walk into the wilds to fight, following the path of the samurai, using only his senses and a wooden staff. Both would become legends of survival in their own right. Israel, having heeded early warnings, fared better than most. It sealed its borders and took in Palestinians as a gesture of mutual survival. The wall held, but not without cost. Internal rebellion, distrust, and infiltration eventually fractured the fragile unity. Meanwhile, the oceans were no refuge. Cruise ships, naval vessels, and smugglers took to the seas, but the infected found their way even there. Life on the water became a floating nightmare. Supplies dwindled, tempers fled. The living turned savage in their hunger and fear. North Korea vanished. Intelligence agencies worldwide watched as the nation sealed its borders and shut down communications. Satellite images showed empty cities. Some speculated the population had taken refuge in vast underground bunkers. Others believed something worse had occurred. Across the globe, humanity was on its knees. Billions were dead. Billions more were undead. The planet belonged to the walkers. And yet, in the silence, a spark of resistance began to grow. Part 3, Turning the Tide. Humanity Strikes Back. Survival became the art of adaptation. The human race, pushed to the brink, had reached the critical moment, evolve or perish. And slowly, painfully, the tide began to turn. It began not with a grand offensive or a superweapon, but with the reprogramming of mindset. The undead weren't enemy combatants. They were a force of nature. They didn't think, didn't fear, didn't retreat. The old rules of engagement were useless. In the United States, a leader emerged, General Travis D. Ambrosia. His plan was not to reclaim everything at once, but to retake land inch by inch. With a strategy called total war, his forces would march methodically through the country, clear one grid zone at a time, and leave nothing behind. Every square meter would be burned clean of the undead. Soldiers were retrained for efficiency. Headshots became muscle memory. Traditional assault rifles were replaced with semi-automatics. There was no longer a need for suppressive fire. Zombies couldn't be frightened. Battles were fought with calm, cold precision. Every bullet was sacred. The Battle of Hope, fought in the Midwest, marked the turning point. It wasn't a victory in the old military sense, but a psychological one. The army moved with purpose, clearing the land and broadcasting their success. Civilians, watching from bunkers and safe zones, saw for the first time that the undead could be beaten. Other nations adapted too. Russia adopted brutal religious reform, purging those they deemed unclean. Priests were given ranks in the army. Every soldier confessed their sins before combat. It was horrifying, but it worked, unity through fear and faith. In Cuba, a surprising renaissance emerged. The island had absorbed countless refugees, transforming its stagnant economy into a thriving one. It became the financial center of the post-war world, exporting resources and leadership. The old dictatorship was replaced with a new form of capitalist governance. From chaos came order. China underwent a quiet but profound revolution. The old regime collapsed under the weight of its failures. Out of the ashes rose a new leader, Admiral Zhu Jikai, who guided the scattered naval forces and coastal survivors. With tactical brilliance, he reclaimed key port cities and established trade routes again. Canada and the northern nations used the cold as a weapon. Zombies froze solid in the winter, giving humans time to regroup and plan. But the winters were brutal, and many died before spring ever came. Everywhere, scattered strongholds began to organize. Stories of human ingenuity lit sparks of hope. A lone woman in the Amazon jungle who turned her knowledge of biology into medicine for her village, a pilot in Iceland who mapped zombie movements from the sky, feral children in Australia who formed their own society and learned to survive without adults. Even Antarctica, cold and desolate, became a base for long-range drone reconnaissance and data analysis. No place was untouched by the war. No place was forgotten. And above all, the survivors began to understand something crucial: this war wasn't just about survival. It was about redefining what it meant to be human. Part 4. Goodbyes and Ghosts: Stories of Survival and Sacrifice. The war wasn't only fought with guns and strategy. It was fought in the hearts and minds of people, those who carried on, even after losing everything. World War Z was not just the story of a species on the brink, but of the souls who stared death in the face and chose to live. Todd Wainio, a former soldier who'd survived the Battle of Yonkers and later helped retake the American Midwest, became a living archive of the war's turning point. His voice cracked as he recalled comrades lost, cities reclaimed, and nights haunted by the screams of the reanimated. He never saw himself as a hero, but as a witness. "You never get used to it," he said. "You just keep going." In India, the sacred Ganges had become a river of the dead. And yet, monks continued to chant on its banks, burning infected bodies in massive funeral pyres. Spiritual leaders emerged, preaching that the war was not divine punishment, but a trial, one meant to strip away ego, fear, and illusion. In these teachings, millions found peace. In South Africa, survivors struggled with the moral stain of the Rediker plan. Millions had died so that a fraction could live. Was it justified? Could survival excuse sacrifice? The debate burned through every level of society. Rediker himself, hidden under a false name and in a state of mental collapse, was rediscovered and interviewed. His mind had cracked. He repeated one phrase again and again: "You can't win a war without losing your soul." In France, historians and artists risked their lives to preserve culture. The Louvre was sealed off, then reclaimed inch by inch. Underground bunkers stored priceless paintings, manuscripts, and sculptures. As one French soldier put it, "We fought not just for our lives, but for our memory." In the American Southwest, Jessica Hendricks, who had once survived a brutal winter in the Canadian wilderness with her family, shared her painful recollections of watching her parents starve. Her voice was thin, distant. "They died for me," she said. "They believed I would live, so I had to." In Cuba, the transformation was almost miraculous. From a closed dictatorship, it had emerged as a beacon of post-war recovery. Its healthcare system, bolstered by necessity, became world-class. Former exiles returned. A new form of governance was built, one that blended social unity with entrepreneurial drive. Meanwhile, in Iceland, a solitary pilot named Christina Eliasson had survived years in the air, flying supply runs and tracking undead migration. "The skies were mine," she said. "But every time I landed, the ground reminded me of everything I'd lost." And then there were the children. A generation raised in bunkers, caves, and ships. They grew up without internet, without school, without safety. And yet they adapted. Ferals in Australia, cyber-rewired minds in Japan, scavengers in Ukraine, they had no choice but to be strong. The war had reshaped childhood into something sharp and necessary. And there were the dogs. Man's most loyal companion had become essential. Trained to detect infected, herd survivors, and even carry messages, dogs became war heroes in their own right. One handler recalled how his German shepherd saved an entire platoon by dragging a live grenade into a horde of walkers. "She never hesitated," he said, his voice breaking. All across the world, these stories formed the mosaic of the war, not of its destruction, but of its humanity. Of endurance. Of grief. Of love surviving even in the face of death. Part 5. The Aftermath: Rebuilding a Broken World. The war had ended, not with a bang, but with a long, grinding silence. The undead still existed in pockets, in frozen wastelands, underwater cities, remote mountain passes. But they no longer ruled the earth. Humankind, bruised and battered, began to reclaim the planet. But nothing was the same. The first challenge was repopulation. The human population had been decimated. Billions were gone. Fertility clinics became sacred spaces. Childbirth was not just a personal act of joy, it was national duty, global responsibility. Every baby represented defiance against extinction. Reconstruction was uneven. The old superpowers no longer held the reins. The United States had survived but was no longer the cultural epicenter. Cuba rose as a global economic leader. South Africa, once deeply divided, had used the Rediker Plan to secure its survival and then leveraged its success into regional influence. China, fractured and humbled, embraced internal reform and quiet diplomacy. Russia remained an enigma, ruthless, religious, scarred. Its people whispered of secret purges and underground cities. Its new leadership presented a calm face to the world, but behind it, power remained tightly clenched. North Korea never resurfaced. Its entire population had vanished. No bodies, no broadcasts, no life signs. Theories abounded: mass suicide, subterranean isolation, or something worse. It became the greatest mystery of the post-war era. In the United States, the political map had changed. The old parties were gone. The capital had been moved from Washington, D.C. to a new, inland location. People trusted local leaders more than national ones. States gained power. Decentralization became the new model. Technology had taken a strange turn. Automation, once a fear, became salvation. Drones rebuilt roads. 3D printing resurrected supply chains. Satellites mapped the last undead hotspots. Still, The global internet had fractured, localized networks became the norm. Globalism had died with the first wave. Psychologically, humanity carried deep wounds. PTSD was not a term anymore, it was a condition nearly everyone lived with. Nightmares weren't treated, they were shed. Therapy was a public service. Suicide rates fluctuated. So did acts of extraordinary kindness. Religions transformed. Some became more rigid, framing the war as divine punishment. Others evolved, emphasizing unity and rebirth. Entirely new faiths emerged, centered on nature, survival, or even reverence for the dead, not worship, but acknowledgement of what had been endured. Education changed too. Children studied zombie physiology alongside algebra. Survival skills were core curriculum. Stories from the war were taught not as legend, but as lived history. Those who survived became guest lecturers, honored like war veterans once were. A global memorial day was declared, Z-Day. It was not celebratory. It was solemn. A reminder. Bells tolled in every city. Names were read. Candles lit. Not to glorify the war, but to remember what it cost. And the final lingering fear remained, could it happen again? Every country maintained a Z-Ward, a rapid response force trained and ready. Satellites scanned for bioanomalies. Coastal waters were patrolled. Religious sites that had once been overrun were monitored closely. Humanity had learned its lesson, never again take peace for granted. Still, for all its scars, Earth was alive. Cities were rebuilt. Forests regrew. Music returned. Children laughed again. And though they would never forget the war, they learned to dream beyond it. Max Brooks closes his journey through the post-war world not with facts, but with reflections. He doesn't ask what caused the war, but what it revealed about us. Our fear. Our resilience. Our cruelty. Our kindness. Our will to survive. In the end, World War Z is not about zombies. It's about being human.